What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to an all-new Mike Wahle Friday here on the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You know my guest already. He's the one and only Mike Wahle. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Wahle68. Mike, I'm sure we were hoping to talk about a little different stuff this week after a Packers-Giants Monday Night Football game, hoping to continue the winning streak. I saw you posted over on Twitter that your son thought it was going to be a trap game. Apparently, he was right. I'd love to hear your thoughts on trap games in general, but how are you doing? And I guess let's talk about some Packers-Giants.
Yeah, doing well. Trap games in general are a real thing. People do overlook that. And somebody asked me a question today. Why do you fall into that trap? And the truth is a lot of athletes are still extrinsically motivated. So not every athlete is intrinsically motivated as much as you think they would be. You're not playing up to the best standards of yourself. Sometimes you are playing to the level of your competition. And that's something that the Packers seem to fall into a little bit this last week.
Yeah, it certainly was definitely disappointing. And it's kind of been that way all season long when they've played some lesser competition outside of maybe the Bears game. And I guess the Rams, when they had Brett Rippon at quarterback, they've played some not great football. And when they've played some rather good competition, specifically Lions, Chiefs, I know the Chargers haven't exactly been great, but you're still going up against Justin Herbert. They played much better. And I was a little worried about that Giants game going in for that exact reason. It felt like there was this, not real, but almost a turn of the page of going from that stretch of games of Pittsburgh, Chargers, obviously, and then the Lions and the Chiefs to now all of a sudden you've got a bunch of games that had a combined, I think it was 20-40 record going into that game. And it's like, how do they handle that? How do they respond to it? And clearly the answer, at least Monday night, was not great.
The thing that happens in during the course of the season, and you got to remember Jordan Love in this group is really young. And a lot of people got really excited when, they're on the winning streak and Jordan's not throwing any picks. But if you're watching film, like I put it on my show all the time, he throws off his back foot a lot. A lot of his balls aren't really good. He threw up that 4th and 1 to Dobbs in I forgot what game that was, where it was probably everyone go, oh, so what a brave, you got to throw it to catch it. It's true, but it's a bad ball. Mm-hmm. And those things, like you revert to the mean, like those things catch up with you in the National Football League. And what happened this week was, all those throws didn't work all of a sudden. Like all the gimme throws, he was all of a sudden really difficult. It wasn't putting it in a place where the guy can run after the catch. Threw some balls. The contested balls that Christian Watson had been catching weren't caught. Maybe they were picked off. Maybe they were just underthrown and they were knocked to the ground. That kind of stuff is like, it's good that they're having success and learning. But then when it comes crashing back down, you realize like, wow, we got a long ways to go. Nothing's really changed. It's just sometimes those plays get made and sometimes they don't. Like the margin for error with this team is actually razor thin because they don't have just, Aaron Jones is out. They don't have this outstanding talent at left tackle anymore. Like they're not a dominant offensive line. I'm just talking about offensively. They have some, they do have some real things they have to think about. They're doing a great job of, using Jaden Reed, not only just with motion to identify coverages and fronts, but also to get him the ball more often because he seems to be the biggest playmaker on the team when Watson's not around or Aaron Jones isn't around. So like Matt LaFleur is still coaching for the last 4 games, in my mind, really, really good offensive game plans. This one, the quarterback in particular, but along the offensive line, really everybody didn't do as good a job of executing. So people are kind of scratching their heads, but it really isn't that much different than the other games, except for some of these passes that, guys like me look at and go, it really wasn't a good ball. And people are like, no, you're hating on him. I'm like, no, I'm not. It's just, these aren't really good balls. It just isn't. And so now it kind of catches up. And it's like, we have a lot of work to do. It's okay. But that's how the ball bounces sometimes.
So much that I want to take from that. I actually want to start with the play calling standpoint, because early in the year when nothing was working, everyone wanted to point to play calling. And at the time I was very much, I'm like, well, they're calling run plays and there's like 3 guys in the backfield immediately. They're calling screen plays and they're not going anywhere. They're throwing a lot down the field and nobody's coming up with the ball down the field. I'm like, what left is on the play sheet that you want to call? Because I'm like, he's trying everything and there's not really anything working. Now, Matt LaFleur, the coach, has shoulders blame for that, but Matt LaFleur, the play caller, I'm not sure what he could have called at times early in the season that was necessarily going to work. And then you go into that middle portion of the season, specifically during the 3-game win streak, and he's calling a lot of the same stuff, or at least, similar stuff. And it's all working. And it's like, oh my goodness, the play calling's amazing. It's like, well, they're executing now. And then he's calling a lot of similar stuff against the Giants and it's not going well. And it's like, Well, they're not executing it. I think I can't remember if you mentioned it as well on the 2-point play. I know Matt LaFleur talked about it. I know I talked about it. It's a tough play because you need a lot of things to go right in order to execute on it. But if, Malik Heath and Elton Jenkins are able to make the 2 blocks on the play, I do think he ultimately walks in the end zone, probably for a touchdown. But yeah, it's just like if they execute on offense, guess what? The play calling starts looking a whole heck of a lot better.
Yeah, certainly. With regards specifically to that 2-point play, you have guys that are critical parts of blocks in an area of the field where there's no other options for them in their position. So like you have like Malik Heath, for example, has to down block.
Yep.
And like that's not his area of expertise. And there's also not a chance that he's going to run a deep crosser because you're on the 2. So that's the interesting part of that play call. Elton Jenkins, like, listen, I don't know if he has the option to run around, like to pull, but like there's no way. I played left guard. There's no way he's
getting
making
to that
block.
spot is hard.
Yeah, there's no way he's making that. I don't care how good he is. Like he's not making that block the way that it's drawn up. So yeah, that's probably a call that LaFleur would like to have back, or at least have an option for like Elgin to run around, because if he does run around, it is a walk in. But to your point, part of the experience of calling plays and understanding this, what's going on, is understanding what your guys are good at, and it's impossible to know after 2.5 preseason games or whatever. With a first-year quarterback, first-year, second-year wide receivers, first-year tight ends, what is going to work, and then what they can actually consume from an information standpoint. Because I think that he has evolved as a play caller. Jaden Reed's probably the most obvious example, but he's evolved as a play caller over the beginning of the season. But to your point, what probably has evolved more is they're not making stupid mistakes in execution. I always talk about, you have to identify, you have to communicate, and you have to execute. And the 3 prior games to this, I think it's fair to say that across the board, the team's doing a much better job of identifying, communicating, and executing. Now, this last game, Jordan Love wasn't executing very well.
Yep.
And if you just look at the fade to Dobbs at the end of the game, where he stopped everybody. I think it was Dobbs was on the left side, singled up. He stops everybody. He gives nonverbal communication that it's going to be a go route. I know what they're going to run. I'm sure everybody who's watched film before knows what he's going to run. And he takes 3 steps. He hitches instead of just letting the ball go, and he underthrows another pass. And it's like the play's there. So you identified it, you communicated it, you just didn't execute. And that's not the fault of the play caller. Now, is that the fault of the footwork coach? Yeah, a little bit, because at some point you got to get better at this stuff. But that's probably a different conversation.
Yeah, I think Toure on the deep
Toure.
ball. Yep. But yeah, totally agreed. And yeah, I kind of want to transition there to Jordan Love, because you hit on a lot of it already. It's a lot of the fundamental stuff, the footwork, the extra hitch, not throwing off his back foot. Like some of that stuff has shown up in random ways throughout the course of the season, but it's been there all season. It does feel like if he's in rhythm and it's 1, 2, 3 out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out, and it's like, again, within rhythm of everything, it does feel like the footwork, the consistency is much, much better. When anything starts to go a little bit more ad lib or off platform or off schedule, then it seems like there's times where he's either like almost voluntarily throwing with bad mechanics, which is interesting, and not necessarily following what I'm sure his QB coach and all of his, technician coaches through the offseason are training him on. It just feels like there needs to be a much greater level of consistency. I think that's probably something that has to take, place probably in the offseason. It's not just going to happen overnight.
I that's the way the NFL coaches think, and I wholeheartedly disagree with that. I mean, it's not an overnight thing, but certainly it's a 2-week fix. You just have to you have to be willing to take the time out of your day to fix it. And honestly, most coaches won't, because they're worried about scheme and setup. But it started this week with, I think it was like a 3rd and 2, and he was throwing a hitch down to the right, and he just started running backwards and throwing forwards. His feet are all crossed over, and he doesn't hit the guy. And you're just going I've seen Russell Wilson doing the wet ball drill in Seattle, for years and years and years. And every time, and, I'm not a Russell Wilson, fan or anything, but perfect form every single time, every play in practice. And you watch that and you go, dude, what are you doing? Of course you're going to not complete that pass. It was it was so egregious. And it's some of this stuff is, I don't know if it's, we call this arm arrogance, because my arm's so good, I can overcome a lot of it. Yeah. I think what people kind of get screwed up on with Brett and watching Aaron is you don't look at the footwork. You look at the way the hips come around when you throw the football. And nobody was better at it really than those two guys. Like their footwork, you could talk about, did you get to the spot you wanted? Well, if you ever watch Brett step into a throw, like nobody stepped into a throw like Brett Favre. Now, what he did after the throw and running away from not getting, rolled up on everything, that was different. But nobody steps into throws like that. I mean, as well as he does. He's really good. He was really good at that stuff. And with Jordan, I would say this. I think that if you watch every single snap this year of him throwing, I would say that whether it's on schedule or off schedule, it's a coin flip whether or not his feet are going to be good, right? Because that throw or a 5-yard out, like what is he bad at, like right now? Or not bad at, but
needs work on.
Biggest areas of improvements, like 5-yard outs, right? 5-yard, 10-yard outs across his body and deep balls, and all of those are kind of basic throws, right? And they're not like those aren't throws that you're going like, oh man, that was amazing. He just made that 5-yard, or oh man, he just threw a fade ball. Like those are kind of basic throws for high school quarterbacks, right? And so the footwork thing is usually systemic in everything that they do. So like Jordan has footwork that needs to be worked on everywhere. Now, whether or not he does better on the move, whether or not he does better with timing, or all that stuff is like we can argue that, but it doesn't really matter. Like the fact is, if they don't fix it, then it is going to be an off-season problem. But my thing is, this can be, if this is brought up as like this is the number one thing we're going to fix right now, it'll get fixed. Like because they're pros and they want to. The problem is a lot of times during the season, you sit here and you go, oh, we got to worry about Tampa Bay's, is Antoine Winfield Jr. coming this good play or not? Like you have to worry about that. And they're like, just get rid of the ball. You know where to throw it, put it here, blah, 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 blah. And they'll spend like their 2.5 minutes of individual work doing something, maybe footwork, maybe not, but it's not really given the attention it deserves.
Yeah, definitely needs to be a point of emphasis moving forward, because it really feels like the main thing that's kind of holding him back from really reaching his potential moving forward. I want to talk about a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball, which I thought actually for the first like maybe 2.25 quarters wasn't actually that bad. It really was fine up until the Keyshawn Nixon fumble, and then they immediately go down and score a touchdown and things kind of unraveled from there. But Green Bay's had a propensity, especially when they get a lead late in the game, to allow the team to go down and score immediately. And it's kind of more some of those situational scenarios where it really is a little bit more glaring. Happened in multiple times this season where they were up in the fourth and gave up the lead. Should have happened another time against the Saints where they had the lead and Winston goes down and they get in field goal range. They just happen to miss the field goal. This week, they don't miss the field goal. They get closer field goal range, and they didn't get the stops when they needed it to. Your evaluation of this Packers defense, where they're at so far this season, and maybe more importantly in some of those clutch situations.
The Packers, what was the number one goal is to stop Saquon Barkley and make this a one-dimensional game. And they did that, like, I think for 2.5 quarters, really, they did that. Actually, but right, but the play before he fumbled, he had a long run. He had that long run and he fumbled, but they had done a great job. The other thing was don't let the quarterback escape towards the line of scrimmage. And I think the problem with this, like, Jordan Love has a footwork thing, and it can be fixed. The Green Bay Packers have a tackling issue, and when are you going to fix it? And the Green Bay Packers have a run fit or communication issue, like RPOs. Didn't happen a lot, but when it happened, it was glaring. Brush lanes didn't happen a lot, but we always talk about, why are we high side of Tommy DeVito? Where's he going to escape to? Towards the line of scrimmage. Like you could literally drop back in that game. You go. And you would literally go, oh, he's running the football. Like it's not a designed run, but he's running the football.
Take off.
Because there's no reason not to. So the frustrating thing I think about Green Bay from a defensive standpoint is you see all these pieces that you go, okay, Kenny's a good player. Preston's a good player. Sean's a good player. Devondre Campbell was second team all-pro 2 years ago. McDuffie's a good player in the right. Why are they not? Like, why does this continue to happen? And it's just the word that comes back all the time, or the two words for me, are attitude and discipline. And those things, I think, are part of your fabric of culture that permeate through the locker room, the meeting rooms, and the field. How the coaches communicate with you, how you communicate with one another. And I honestly think, without getting to, this is one game and all this stuff, but you look at this team in general compared to what the expectations are, I would say that they probably have some sort of like mental block between what they think they could be and what they know they should be. And I don't know how to fix that, externally outside of that room. But I can tell you this: if you just spent a real forcible amount of time studying and understanding why you're missing tackles and improving on that, like I took the Miami Dolphins one year. I took over the tackling for the team. We were like 65% efficient in tackling. It was awful. 2 weeks later, just by shining a light on it, 5 minutes a day, 3 times a week, okay, we improved tackling 20 percentage points, and for the rest of the year. And it's like, I'm not a magician, right? You just shine a light on a problem, and pro athletes want to fix a problem. So if they're getting embarrassed because they're missing something, you're like, hey, I know how to fix this. Let's just work on it. They'll fix it. So if you're not getting better at something, there's a reason. And if it's not the staff or the practice system that is going to allow you to improve, you got to do it on your own. I mean, it's just one of those things. And it's frustrating because there's a lot of talent on that side of the football.
When you talk about fundamentals, I think that's one of the keys, and tackling goes right there with it. I also want your thoughts on, I don't feel like this is a very attacking defense. It feels like they're more back up, keep everything in front of them. They're not. I wonder, like, I'm sure every defender to a T wants to play a more physical attacking style of defense. You're talking about there being maybe a mental block of like what they can be and what they should be. I wonder in today's NFL if you can just consistently play that same kind of vanilla, kind of backing up style of defense, a little bit more passive, not as aggressive. And if you just don't lose some of the players' intensity and focus and everything, because it almost feels like it's on autopilot. It almost feels like, we're just going to back up, do the same things, keep everything in front of us. I feel like look what Minnesota's doing right now and playing a very attacking style, like exotic blitzes coming from different areas of the field. I just don't see that same creativity and imagination. I'm sure there are players on that defense that would love a little bit more of that to be able to, maybe feel alive every now and again, if nothing else. It just feels like like when you say attitude and when you say there's that mental block, like that's what I kind of immediately go to of, can you consistently play this style of defense and actually get really impressive results over the course of a year?
Let's say the last 5 years in the National Football League, the trend was, for a lot of teams was to give, bend and not break.
Yep.
So I'm just going to look at I think the Tampa Bay numbers, even on their defense, like they're 13th in the league on defense. But if you look at like their yards given up, they give up 29th in the league or something. It's not very good. I don't remember what the number is.
Yep.
The point is there's a lot of teams that are like that. The problem with the pack, or the thing that's unique about the Packers, and you see this a lot in the National Football League, is the defensive coordinator is looking at, one, he's got a system that he wants to run. And that's the first and foremost. Like, are you willing to change systems? Are you going to run the system that you want to run? And then the second thing is, if you're running the system you want to run and you all of a sudden don't feel confident in some of the players, let's say they just think you need 2 shutdown corners. You need to be like Miami's defense with those, Jalen Ramsey and Xavier Howard in order to play the defense you want to play. If you don't have them, what does that mean? Does that mean that you just can't run that anymore? Or you're just going to play soft? Like, you have to be able to adjust to what you have, but you also have to be not playing for, and I'm not saying that this is what happens specifically with Green Bay, but this is a general statement. As a coach, you have to be not coaching for your job every week. You have to be coaching to win every week. And I think a lot of guys are like, well, I don't trust this player, so we're going to do this. And we know that this isn't what we really want to do, but this is how. That is a real problem to me because it permeates through the room and people feel that, right? They feel that they're not like, we're not good enough to do what you want to do, or why are we playing this soft defense? Like, I'm a good player. Why do you have me playing this? But I do want to say this, because if you watch Isaiah McDuffie, who's not the most skilled guy in the world, to spend as much time on the other side of the line of scrimmage as he can. Now, there's downsides to that, certainly. You can run more RPO stuff based off the linebacker. Just, they did it in the game. Like, there's things that you can do because of that. But if you're just talking like guys that want to take on blocks, you have a lot of players on this team that don't want to take on blocks. Not a lot, but you have enough at key positions that aren't guys that just go downhill and take on blocks. And if you're not that kind of player, if you're more of a rangy, athletic player, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen are probably the 2 best linebackers in the game right now as far as tandems in Baltimore Ravens guys, right? They will they can kind of do whatever you want. You want to play physical? I'll play physical. You want me to slip a block? I'll slip a block. You want me to run you over? I'll run you over. If you don't have those kind of guys at the second level, it's really tough to enforce your personality on these different programs, because I can always figure out how to block your defense, like your defensive line. I don't care how good you are. I can figure out how to block. It's the secondary guys. It's the Derek Brooks and the Sheldon Quarles guys. Like, we're going to make it impossible for this to work. And if you don't have guys that are like, you're going to double team, fine, I'm going to knock the block off one of your the second player on the double, or I'm going to knock the block off your running back in the backfield. If you don't have those guys, it's really, really tough to enforce. You can use a safety and kind of try to make it happen, but we don't have that either. So there's a couple different things going on there, but I think you really need to celebrate aggression and celebrate playing downhill and get that idea flowing through you, but it has to start with that coordinator, and you have to have the guys that really believe they can do that at a high level.
Totally agree. I think it was this past week where Patrick Queen just ran through I think it was an offensive lineman and just
it could be any week. I mean, that's how they are.
Yeah. It's probably true. It's very probably true. But yeah, he's had an impressive season this year and really has come along through the course of his career. I want to ask you about two rookies and just your overall impressions. I'll start with defense since we're talking about defense right now. Your thoughts on Lucas Van Ness, first round pick, top 15 guy, see the athleticism, but got a little bit run over in a red zone play this week and kind of has his ups and downs. What are your impressions of him so far?
I have the exact same thought process that I did before the draft when I watched him on tape. And it's like Iowa kid, probably going to be good in a couple of years. Shocked that he was a 13th pick in the draft. Has no pass rush moves. Plays really hard. They put him in a 2-point stance and he's not good in it. He's much better out of a 3-point. He plays with better leverage. Like his intensity. I'm sure I would love his intangibles. As far as personality, loving the game and all that. He looks like he wants to play, like all that stuff. I have no question about that. I just question your preparedness for being a huge impact player at the 13th pick in the draft, and nothing's changed. I think a couple of years from now, you might go, "Wow, you really got something here." I think it's just as likely as you're looking a couple of years from now, going, "That guy's a really solid player. He's never going to have more than 7 sacks in a year, and 6 of them are going to be effort sacks."
I'm with you, and I'm hoping it's a similar trajectory to Rashawn Gary, where it takes a couple seasons and puts it together. But I'm with you. It's been, I don't even know what word I want to use for it. It's just it's the exact same thing we saw at Iowa. We knew it was going to take some time. There's no pass rush plan. There's no counters. There's no nothing. Great size, great speed, great everything, great intangibles, like you said. But everything else needs a lot of polish and a lot of work right now. I'm going to go to the other side of the ball. Somebody that I thought had a really nice week this week, 4 catches, 64 yards, continues to get better as a blocker, looked lost in training camp as a blocker, does not look quite as lost anymore. Tucker Kraft, really nice week this week. Your impressions of him so far through the season?
Yeah, it helps that Musgrave's hurt. I think for his development, just gets more reps. More reps, you're gonna be ascend at a higher rate. Listen, there's people that were picked around that position, that time in the draft that I think, nothing against Tucker Kraft, I would be probably excited about having on this football team. Tucker is it's always hard with tight ends because like Tucker Kraft had 4 for 64. I think he had a 43-yard catch in the game. But usually with tight ends, like you're either a guy who really separates and creates one-on-one opportunities, which he's not really that guy. Like he caught some good plays in zone and then, run up for the catch is great. And I'm not dismissing any of it. So let's just be clear about that. I'm not bad-mouthing him at all. But it's not like you're putting him out there against the slot nickel or like the safety and be like, man, he's just beating him one-on-one for fade routes. It's like, that's not happening. Yep. And then so it's like, well, what are you bringing to the table? Because it's in offenses, it's kind of a niche position now, right? It's like, there's not a lot of Gronkowskis. There's not a lot of Kittles. Like the reason Kittle's Kittle because there's nobody else like him. Like there's, even Mark Andrews is not quite there, right? Whereas there's a guy who can literally do everything. And so my hope is that Tucker Kraft continues to improve as a blocker, because I think the pass catching game, you kind of see what he's going to be. Get open in zone, probably not a big threatened man, not going to be like a matchup guy, not going to be a guy you got circled on your calendar. But if you can play every down because you're really like your Bubba Franks, like Bubba Franks is the same guy, right? Bubba's just a better blocker, probably a little bit better receiver. Like, Bubba's a little bit better than him his rookie year, but Bubba could just kind of do everything pretty darn well, and he becomes extremely valuable. And you're kind of hoping with Tucker Kraft, like I would say the ceiling for Tucker is probably Bubba, which is a really high ceiling, by the way. So if he can become that kind of player where you don't ever have to take him off the field, that's a huge win for Green Bay.
Yeah, I'm hoping it trends in that direction as well. And what I'm most excited about is the potential tandem with Musgrave and Kraft if those guys can continue to develop. And Musgrave can be more of your receiving tight end. Kraft can be a little bit more of your well-rounded overall tight end. Again, they both have things that they need to improve upon to get there, but I think you could have a really fun 1-2 punch with Musgrave and Kraft long-term.
Yeah, no doubt. And the thing, what casual fans might not understand is why do you care if there's two tight ends? Well, it screws up the defense. Yeah, like really, really bad. And so the defense has to figure out, do they want to bring out an extra linebacker, extra defensive? Like, what do they want to do to counter having two tight ends in the game that can actually do the job? Like, if you bring Kyle Pitts, when Atlanta goes 12 personnel, they run 11. They're just running nickel. It doesn't count. Kyle Pitts doesn't play. He's not a receiver. When Travis Kelce's in the game, the Kansas City Chiefs aren't getting base defense against Travis Kelce. They don't care because Travis Kelce's not a blocker. Okay. So you want to have guys that can do both. I can line up in like a heavy front with two tight ends, one hipped off, and I can run the ball all day. And oh, by the way, both those guys can run go routes on my safeties. If you can get two guys like that, which I think that the reason the Packers drafted both these players, because they see in the future that's the potential, you have an absolutely incredible mismatch. Because what that does, I know you know this was for your fans, is you put those guys in the game and they go base defense, they're going to have to play single safety. And one safety, now whoever's on the outside, Christian Watson, you basically you just throw one more guy in the backfield, you have go routes as all you can eat. You're going to have like 5 singled up matchups on the outside all day. And all you need is 3, right? You get 3 matchups outside with 3 big balls, you get a PI and two catches. That changes the complexion of the game. So that's the chess match that's being played here by Goody, first and foremost.
I'm smiling because I did a members only video probably 2 hours before this talking about Tucker Kraft and if Kraft and Musgrave can develop, how they'll start running a ton of 12 personnel, and it could be a massive mismatch because teams will have to figure out how to play. Now, again, they both have a ways to go before they're that mismatch pieces that they need it to be, and how defenses defend that will be interesting. But that's the vision. The vision is there. Now they just have to go out and continue to get better and continue to execute it. And it could be a lot of fun moving forward. All right, real quickly, a couple last things. Bucs Packers, what are you looking for this weekend?
Well, I think that the Bucs have a good defense, and they like to bring pressure. They bring a lot of pressure out of bunch looks, out of tight looks. Antoine Whitfield's always kind of, even though he plays free safety, he's kind of always around the ball, always around the line of scrimmage. He's going to be pressure. So how the Green Bay Packers going to continue to use motion and formations to kind of identify what those guys are going to be doing pre-snap? I think that's probably first and foremost of importance. We don't know if Vita Vea is going to play. He's one of the better, run-stopping defensive guys in the league, and he's unblockable one-on-one in pass rush as well. Excuse me, but he's got a toe thing. Kalijah Cansey, I really like him, 94. He's the rookie from Pitt. He's been playing at a high level. So I think when you look at Packers offense versus this defense, they're missing their 2 starting corners, but they still have Winfield. They still KJ Britt's been playing good for Devin White. I mean, they've still got a really good, what I just call elite mindset defense. Like, these guys have been to the Super Bowl, they've been to the promised land. Like, they know how good they are. They're not afraid to make mistakes. They play hard. They played this Todd Bowles pressure scheme defense. They'll mix up coverages at the snap. So it's absolutely mission critical for Jordan Love and these receivers, maybe first and foremost, is to get on the same page pre-snap and just have answers for all the pressure you're going to be seeing, because early answers kind of discourages what they want to do over the course of the game. And then on the other side of the ball, it's like Baker Mayfield, it feels like a journeyman, even though it was the first round pick. It's like I was making a joke this morning, like if he would have never done Prudential commercials, imagine what he could have been. You know what I mean? Because he started off his career pretty well, and he's a really smart guy. He can get to his 4th and 5th read. Mike Evans is the name of the game over there. It's like, how are you going to treat him? Are you going to try to double him? Because if you try to double him, last week the Falcons did that a little bit, and it became problematic in the run game. They started giving up a lot of yards running. I think they ran for 148 last week. They're not a good running football team. But if you're going to disrespect an NFL team by only putting 6 in the box, Rashad White's a good running back. Tristan Wirfs is one of the best tackles in the game. Like, they can just run with no tight ends in the game, just open it up and do whatever they want. I think up front, even though you would think on paper the Green Bay Packers defensive line is the superior matchup. So this game is going to come down to really a couple things, a couple things for me. Number one are the Green Bay Packers going to be able to really use that motion to identify the fronts? Number two, are we going to be able to communicate our way out of some of the problems we had last week, maybe most importantly in the pass rush? Like you have to be able to keep Baker Mayfield running away from the line of scrimmage. It's the easiest thing in the world, but you got to be able to do it. And then number three, like, are we ever going to get to the point with this team where you feel confident that you can call a running play for A.J. Dillon and get more than 4 yards?
Yeah. I'm with you. Like, I think I was just talking about this too on our Q&A a little bit ago, is like, they just need a little bit more explosiveness in that running game. And Aaron Jones practiced today as we're talking on Thursday. Maybe this is the week that they can get a little something out of Aaron Jones, which I think would be huge. Going back to Baker Mayfield, I think not only the commercials, but what he gets Hugh Jackson his rookie season. I think he either gets fired midway through or early the next year. Freddie Kitchens takes over. And then you've got Stefanski. Like, he goes through, I think, three offensive coordinators immediately, then has a cup of coffee with the Rams and Sean McVay, and then goes to
Carolina there somewhere, right?
Yeah, Carolina first. Goes to Carolina with that nightmare of a franchise right now. Then has a cup of coffee with the Rams and McVay, and now is with Tampa in that offense. So it's like he's been in the league for, like you say, like the journeyman aspect of it for like 5 or 6 years. I think he's had like 6 or 7 offensive coordinators or different offensive minds that have been telling him. I feel like that's one of those where you always go back and say, like, if a player had like a different team that he went to and a consistent structure, maybe a couple of years to develop, that would have been one with Baker Mayfield that I would have been really interested if he had one consistent coach, maybe he had a year or two to sit behind someone. Just didn't work that way. He's a talented player, but never really came all together. And on the defensive side, really quick, before I let you respond to that, Antoine Winfield, sneaky free agent want for me in the offseason. I don't think they should go like all out and like do like a ton of signings, but one really impact signing, especially on defense. They have no safeties basically under contract besides Anthony Johnson Jr. and Zane Anderson. They go big game hunting. Antoine Winfield, sign me up for him as safety in the offseason. Yeah,
that's an interesting one. Just because my mind always goes back to Brian Branch, and I know he's kind of a hybrid. He's like the star player at Alabama and whatnot, but I think there's a really good number of safeties for some reason coming out of college football right now because they're asked to do so much in the college football game that could be another option. But yeah, Antoine Winfield Jr. is a really good player. You're right about Baker Mayfield, though. It's so funny. I tell people this because I had the pleasure of being to work for Green Bay and then going to Carolina, then going to Seattle, which is a phenomenal organization. And then working as a coach on the other side, going down to Miami. And just that was for a lot of those years, it was a dumpster fire. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's not any one person's, it's the culture of the organization, and it starts at the top. And I used to tell guys, like, when they got traded or something, and they get traded to a good team, I'm like, dude, you're about to understand how the other half lives. Where you actually have a chance to develop. You actually have an organization that is first and foremost worried about winning, but the way they're going to win is they're going to win for over the long term because they're going to make you a better player, or they're going to at least put you in positions to be successful. And some of these places do, and some of them don't. You look at like Cleveland was a great example of, and Carolina right now is a great example of, you have ownership that doesn't have the foresight, despite as much success that they've had in other aspects of their lives. They just don't have the foresight to look into what makes organizations great. And it's not always number crunching, it's people. And if you hire the wrong people, you always have problems. So yeah, I'm with you on Baker, man. I was a big fan of his coming out of college, and I've been kind of, I make the Prudential joke, but it's kind of been a sad story for a guy that could have been a lot more, I think, if he had better opportunities.
I'm right there with you. Really quick, before I get you out of here, hip drop tackle being looked at by the league. I think Roger Goodell says they should look at it and look at potentially eliminating it. Is it A, possible, B, doable, and C, should they even look at it in the first place?
I used to do meetings with a bunch of guys that are in the league and last year. and we talked about this, and I actually did a presentation on it because the rotational force of a hip drop tackle. So for people who don't know, imagine you were wrestling down a bull, like, or a steer. You go to the rodeo, they grab onto the young steer, and they swing in front of its legs, right? So they put all the pressure on its neck. Well, what does that do? That drops the center of gravity in front of that steer, right? But that rotational force, all of a sudden you have a huge multiple of force or power going down on that body, right? But in that case, everything's already going forward, so you just fall down. When it happens with a hip drop tackle, the problem they have is not when the legs swing in front, it's when the legs swing behind. So there's two things happening. One, an incredible multiple of force production is occurring on the lower limbs of that person who's carrying the ball, who's taking that hit. And then two, you're adding to that some pressure, some direct pressure put on by the tackler's body. And so the chances for injury are just astronomically higher in a hip drop tackle than any other tackle. And it's really never been used up until the last couple of years. Like, it's the reason that it's never really been considered is because nobody really ever did it. And now, unfortunately, this is the thing with the NFL. Do you want me to rant for a minute? Because
yeah, go for it. Mike's all yours.
So here's what happens with the NFL. The NFL says, I want to play 18 games. The owners want 18 games. So they go, okay, what do we need to do? Well, we need to put this out that we're really about player safety. And so they go, oh, the helmets, the head concussions, this and that. A bad movie comes out, CT. Okay, we got to do the concussion thing. So we work on helmets. And then we start protecting the quarterback because we know the quarterbacks are bread and butter and nobody wants to watch games with bad quarterbacks in. Okay, so we start doing that. Oh, we want to legislate violence out of defense because we don't want our fantasy football players hurt because the game is about betting. So we do that. Last year, all the while, by the way, they won't change the field turf because apparently that, and they manufacture bogus reports about field turf, which have been since rescinded because they understand that field turf is cheaper than grass and easier to maintain. So now, last year, we're talking with some people that are higher up in the NFL going, putting together a presentation going, why aren't you addressing this? Like, this is actually a real problem. And I'm a rugby guy and I'm a football guy and I don't want to change anything, but I'm looking at this like, this is a real problem, okay? And they said, quite frankly, not enough premier guys have gotten – Tony Pollard at the time was the only premier guy that had gotten hurt. Not enough premier guys have gotten hurt. So what did Roger Goodell and the group do? They looked at the play with the highest instance per play of injury, which is the kickoff, okay? It's the highest instance per kickoff. It is like the 97th highest instance per game or actual play, right? So it's the highest instance per kickoff. They go, oh, we're going to have a fair catch now, and we're making the game safer. But the reality is that had almost a negligible impact on the safety of the NFL, whereas this would have had a monumental impact. The fact was they didn't want to invest time in it until more premier guys got hurt. And now that it has, I'm sure they're going to look at it. So it is for JJ Watt and the guys out there are like, Richard Sherman said this too, like, we're taking violence out of football and this and that. Like, I'm 100% with you most of the time. This one, I don't know how to get rid of it. I don't know if you're going to get fined or 50, but I'm just saying, just from a physics standpoint, this one is a real problem. Like, this can break lower body, like tibia fibulus, really, really easy.
Yeah, with players getting hurt and it being an impact, and it sounds like Roger Goodell is already very much against it now. So my guess is we will see something legislated on it. It'll just be more interesting to see how they actually go about doing that. Mike, amazing stuff as always. Anything else you want to chat about? Any final plugs, or otherwise tell us where we can find your work on the way out?
Yeah, On My Block podcast is out previewing this game. It's on the Process to Perform channel on YouTube. You can check me out, Mike Wahle 68 on Twitter. Process to Perform on Instagram. And yeah, man, thanks for having me on. And always fun. Always fun. Of course, make sure to like and comment on those Mike Wahle videos as well. We always appreciate that. You can follow me at Andy Herman NFL, again, at Mike Wahle 68. That's going to do it for us today. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.